What is the most horrifying thing you've ever seen out of your window? What happened? My partner and I were in our living room, and we saw a person in the building next to us jump to their death from a really high floor. Before they made that final decision, they kept screaming at someone inside their condo that they didn't want to live anymore. We could hear them clearly, and then just dove out their window. They crushed the landscaping along the sidewalk when they landed, and because it was in the morning on a weekday, there was a school bus picking up kids rounding the corner of our block. The doormen of 3 buildings ran out to stop the bus from passing the body before one of them could throw a painter's tarp over it, as there was no other alternate route for the bus to pass. I just remember a woman from a lower floor than ours in another building throwing a bedsheet from her window to building staff below to help cover the blood the tarp didn't hide before the bus made its way past. The entire situation was truly horrifying. Next story. Looked out the window at like 2 a.m. and saw a guy across the street, but I could tell he was looking at me even at a distance. Tried to ignore it and go back to sleep. Woke up 2 hours later and he was still there, and that crap creeped me out. Next story. Some girl was getting harassed asking to be left alone while stumbling. It was audible enough for me to be curious, so I went to go look through my living room window. Some dude grabbed her by the shoulder, and the girl was resisting, saying, "Piss off, I don't like you." A car pulled up next to them on the curb. While the guy was walking her to the back of the car and putting her in the back, I swear I heard her audibly say, "Stop, get away from me, I'm going home, please, who are you?" while crying. I called the cops immediately. I put on pants and a shirt and ran downstairs. The car was long gone. I did try catching the license plate for my window, but I didn't have my glasses, and I was on the 4th floor. I know it was a black sedan, but I don't know the make or model year. Operator said they would send an officer over anyways. The car was already gone by then. There were cameras. Officer arrived about 10 minutes later. I reported what I saw, and a neighbor came down and reported the same thing. I hope that girl is okay. Next story. There was a tree outside my window. I woke up in the middle of the night to a man climbing up the tree, taking the screen off, and crawling through my window. Absolutely frozen in fear, horrified, the most scared I've ever been. Turns out it was my dad who was out cheating on my mom. Every night for the next few years, through the window, scared me. Next story. I was looking out my window and I saw my neighbor's house burning, but it was isolated to the bedroom across from my upstairs bedroom. It never spread and was isolated to that one room. Very odd. Took me a while to realize it was a reflection of my trash can in my backyard burning, and my neighbors on my side had already called fire department. I was watching my own trash can burn for quite a while in that reflection. Next story. That would be my neighbor's roof flying over my house and landing on my other neighbor's house during a hurricane. Not the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in general, but out my own window, certainly. Next story. At about 5 p.m., I'm watching YouTube videos on my phone on the couch when I hear screaming for help coming down the street. I don't even grab shoes. I call 911 as I run out my building, and there is a woman screaming trying to get out of the passenger side, and the driver beat her. It's a one-way street, and the car in front has stopped. The driver left to block the attacker from leaving. I'm giving dispatcher my location and license plates while I run to the car. He lets her go, and I rush her inside my building and apartment and lock the door. Grab my pistol, and we waited for police. They arrive, arrest the guy, take statements, and tow his crap. That was the most horrifying screaming I had ever heard. When EMS took her, I handed her my phone number. Please text me when you are safe and with your people. Next story. I had some guy come up to my door in a nice blue polo with a clipboard, asking about water filters or something. He kept bugging me about coming in every time I said no, asked like 5 times, and kept offering discounts and free trials. Finally left, and I locked up before looking out the corner of my blinds. 2 guys with bandanas over their faces hopped out from behind some bushes in front of my house, and they quickly headed off with the clipboard guy. Next story. After a night out, I fell asleep on the sofa. I was in a top and pants. My husband went to bed and left the hallway light on for me. I randomly woke up. In hindsight, I know it was the gate opening that woke me up. It has a distinct noise, although I still don't remember hearing it. Anyway, I woke up and walked upstairs to the spare bedroom. Husband snores after drinking, hence the separate bed choice. Said spare bedroom is at the back of the house, directly above my back door. It's a very still and quiet night. It's 3 a.m. at this point. I turn the light off to get into bed, and I hear, "Stop, someone's awake. The light just went off." And I literally froze. It sounded like they were in the house, but they were outside and below me. I don't know how I did it, but I very calmly walked to the main bedroom, woke my husband up. He told me to stay in the bedroom and he closed the door. He very loudly started banging on the walls and walking heavily and ran downstairs shouting. Anyway, the bedroom light was off, so I looked out the window and there was a few guys staring up at me. I'll never forget it. Then we bought Ring cameras. Next story, a little girl on the swing across my home, with the hood of her coat over her head and her legs facing the other way. Turns out she put her jacket on the other way around. Nearly had a heart attack. Next story, I worked for the railroad as an engineer. There were countless crossing accidents and several deaths that I viewed out my window. However, it was while working as a conductor that I saw up close the destruction of human bodies following a collision with a train. This is all from 20 plus years ago, but some of these incidents stick in my mind. Next story, a man who had jumped 16 floors headfirst into the beer garden at my work. I was chopping carrots, heard a man shout, then a strange noise. Then a woman, who turned out to be his girlfriend, at the cafe across the road, start to scream and run toward us. I looked out the window, and there he was. The beer garden wasn't accessible from the street, so thankfully his girlfriend couldn't get to him and didn't see. It's been 24 years, and I don't think a week has gone by where that man hasn't crossed my mind. Next story. It was 2 a.m. I was looking to my roof terrace glass door in the 5th floor and imagined someone was standing there. Usually I turn on the outside lights and the ghosts disappear. But that one time a huge guy looking angry really stood there, staring at me. I froze for a moment. It was like a nightmare became true. Then he knocked. I don't even know how he got there, since it was really high. I grabbed my baseball bat and aggressively opened the door and threatened him. He didn't expect that, but then asked if he can go through the apartment to leave. Hell nah. I closed the door again and called the police. I mentioned my address first, and they came in less than 60 seconds after calling them. I have barely hung up when they rang. The police ran up, asked where the intruder is, rushed to the terrace, and the man was gone. Magic. 3 minutes later, they found him. An apartment under mine. He had tried to climb down. Nobody knows how he got up. Maybe he had jumped from one roof to the next one. Next story. I used to live near an overpass over a freeway. Once, I looked at the window to see a shirtless man, almost entirely covered in blood from head to toe, in broad daylight, standing near the edge of the overpass. My brain seized up, and I genuinely just did not comprehend what I was seeing. I thought it was some kind of joke or political stunt, that the blood was fake. He had scraggly long hair and was barefoot. I had the presence of mind to look away at this point, realizing I was about to witness a death, but I heard a loud scream, and morbid curiosity dragged my gaze back, and the man was somehow still there, just wavering on the edge. I watched as a van suddenly screeched to a halt nearby, and a woman, the source of the scream, practically flung herself from the vehicle, though it had just barely stopped moving. She leapt at him with both of her arms outstretched and dragged the man back down to the ground, just in the nick of time. I witnessed all as if in slow motion. I could have sworn the moment she grabbed him was the exact moment he was jumping. That woman most definitely saved a life that day. The cops and AMBO pulled up shortly after. I went over afterwards to offer assistance, and it became evident that prior to his attempt, the man had thrown himself into the windscreen of a nearby parked car and caused a massive crack. That's where all the blood must have come from. Sheer impact force. I don't know what happened to the guy after all that, but I really hope he got the help he needed. Pro tip, if you ever witness something as violent as that, talk to somebody. I didn't feel affected at the time, but I still get nervous and think about it every time I go near that road to this day, which makes sense. In hindsight, it was crazy. Another lesson learned is that bystander effect is a real thing. It's easy to say in an emergency you'll know how you'll act, but it's not true. Many others who witnessed the event were similarly frozen in confusion, and it was only by luck that other people had managed to call the authorities earlier. Don't beat yourself up for how you react to traumatic situations. Also, play Tetris as soon as you can after a traumatic incident. Research says it helps your brain. Next story. Saw a woman get run over by her boyfriend. I grew up in a low-income area. Fights were not uncommon. A loud altercation was going on across the street from our apartment. I peeked out the second-floor windows to see what all the yelling was about. I watched as the couple shouted at each other. Then the guy walked away. The woman continued shouting. The South got louder. That's when I saw a white car jump the curb and roll right over the woman who tried to turn and run. I was maybe 8 years old, but I remember shouting for my mom. People were screaming and huddled around the woman. Ambulance and cops came. The woman didn't die, Her family moved not long after the incident. Next story. Bit of a background. My mom has like half an acre of backyard, and it snowed the night before. If you're standing in the kitchen, there's a big window that looks into the backyard. Looked out and saw shoe prints from the window of the kitchen to where the corner of the house starts. Walked out to look where the shoe prints went, and the shoe prints just stopped. Not like stopped and made a different turn or went back. They just disappeared. Like, just gone. It was weird, and Mom didn't even question it or ask any follow-up questions. Just, okay. This all happened in the middle of the night, by the way. Next story. Once, when I was a kid, while my dad was driving me somewhere, we wound up behind a station wagon. Don't ask me what model, because this was almost a decade and a half ago, if my dates are right, and I've always been abysmal at identifying car models just by looking at them. There was a girl a little older than me in the back, as in behind the rearmost row of seats, and she looked despondent. When she caught sight of Dad and me, she started desperately trying to get our attention, and her arms moved weirdly. As I've gotten older, I've worked out that it's highly likely her wrists were zip-tied or something similar, but at the time, I didn't really have any frame of reference for anything other than cartoony handcuffs. When I tried to get my dad to do something about it, he ordered me to knock it off / stop distracting him while he was driving, and he refused to acknowledge the idea that the girl in the station wagon was anything other than desperate for attention and acting out, given how long it's been, but that's the gist of it. The last I saw her, one of our two vehicles made a turn that the other one didn't. I really hope she's okay, but my gut's telling me she's really not. Next story. Finally, a chance to tell my story. My bedroom window was up. It was dark outside and raining. My cat, Porky, was in the window chilling when I saw them. Right outside my bedroom window. A pair of terrifying, glowing eyes looking straight at me. I had to squint my eyes to make sure I was seeing what I was seeing. Yep, no doubt, those were indeed glowing eyes glaring at me. I screamed at the top of my lungs, and poor Porky, I scared the piss out of her, literally. When I screamed, she darted from the window, leaving nothing but a yellow stream behind her. My mother came, checked closer, and pointed out that those eyes were the reflection of my bedroom light, shining on 2 wet leaves of the wild plum bush in front of my window. I couldn't believe it. It was so real, and I was still panicky. I can look back on it and laugh now. Next story. Wake up and I heard birds singing a beautiful song. I go to the window and open it. I'm immediately reminded that I no longer live in my quiet FL suburb. No, I live in LA. What I see is an empty fenced lot, topped with barbed wire and filled with trash. What I don't see are birds or anything sweet and cute. I start looking around as I still hear the bird song, and when I locate the source, it's a homeless man hiding behind his shopping cart, taking a crap on the sidewalk, making bird calls from behind a parked car. Of course, my window is positioned directly behind him, so I had a clear shot of him. Just the worst. Next story. When my kids were little, we lived in an apartment complex that was usually pretty quiet. But one morning we were getting ready for work and school, and we looked outside and a SWAT team had taken over the parking lot. There was someone with a gun who had hit someone else inside their apartment and was barricaded in there, I guess. And they were all ready for a shootout. Luckily, they managed to get the guy to come out somehow, but I was wondering if the walls were bulletproof at the time. Next story. My friend was over and we heard screaming, so I looked out my window. A couple M and F, probably in their 20s, were having a physical altercation, a very aggressive one at that. I panicked and thought to call the police, but they stopped shortly after because he started walking away, and she was screaming, "No, baby, I'm sorry. Please don't do it." At this point, I realized what he was doing. He started walking towards the highway right next to my apartment building. It was around 2 a.m., so the roads weren't busy. But me and my friends started to panic even more, because I wasn't sure if we were about to witness a death. The girlfriend's demeanor changed pretty drastically, and she started screaming again as he stood in the middle of this road. "Do it, no one loves you anyways. You damn deserve it." I get my phone ready to dial 911 as we see a car driving down the road and he just stands there. We're both in shock, but thankfully the car swerves and pulls over. The boyfriend collapses to the ground and puts his hands over his head as the driver runs to him and I see him take a phone out. Anyways, cops come and make sure he's okay, and I assume bring him elsewhere. The girlfriend had run inside her apartment building, so no one spoke to her, but I hope he got the help he needed and is able to recover mentally. Boy, was that the most terrifying night. Next story. One night, I heard a woman yell, "You just beat the crap out of me," between sobs. Never seen them before, and this was unusual for the neighborhood. I went outside, but stayed hidden. They were arguing outside of a vehicle parked across the street, a bit behind a hedge. The crying and yelling continued. She was scared to get into the vehicle, so I called 911. The 911 operator insisted I provide the license plate number before she could send police. I really didn't want to make myself visible to the couple, but she kept telling me that she needed it. The location wasn't enough? Eventually, I crept forward, but the man saw me and pulled the woman into the vehicle and sped off. I got a partial plate in the dark. I also provided the type of vehicle and the direction they were going. I later got a call back from 911. They do that here. That said they pulled over a vehicle matching the description and plates nearby, but the couple said it wasn't them, so they let them go. Fantastic work, authorities. I'm sure that lady is feeling safe these days. Also, I was scared for months that the guy would come back and confront me, a woman in her 40s, over calling, thanks to being repeatedly told that I had to go look at the license plate. He definitely knew which house I had come out of, but I never saw them again. I hope she's okay. I tried.
Next story. Saw my nephew getting hit by a car. My nephew was on his bike, and like all kids, thought he was invincible. He shot out from beside the house, ringing the bell on his bike. I just happened to see him as I was standing at the front window. Zoom! Straight out into the road, and cycled directly into the path of an oncoming car. The bike slapped into the side of the car. My nephew went flying, straight up into the air, bounced on the car roof, and landed head first on the road. Apparently, I screamed and screamed and screamed, but I don't remember that. I do remember that I couldn't move a muscle. The driver got out and vomited. Kid got up, dusted himself off, not a mark on him. He had his helmet on and it saved him. I mean it. He hardly even bruised. One bruise on his hip, and his head was sore, but that's it. He bent the frame of his bike, caved in the door of the car, dented the roof, cracked and scraped his helmet, and he was fine. Even the ambulance crew were all, WTF? How? Obviously, they still brought the kid to hospital, where he was thoroughly checked out. And yes, thank God, he was absolutely fine. But I will never, ever forget it. The horror of seeing that. I thought he was dead. Everyone did. It wasn't the driver's fault at all. That poor man had to be taken to hospital as the shock hit him badly. Next story. I saw my neighbor and his friend getting lost. Was in my room, front facing. Heard 6-ish shots. Crawled across the floor to my window to look because I thought it was a couple of houses down and not actually directly in front of my house. It was dusk and I could see the flame coming out of the gun because the guy shot 6-ish more times. My neighbor ran around like a chicken with his head chopped off the entire time. His friend darted to the front patio and collapsed. Watched the shooter run off anyway. It was gang-related. Both boys, like at most 20 years old, were okay, but shot. I yelled out the window, "Y'all okay?" and was told to call the police, so I did. Checked on them, made sure the dogs in their backyard were okay. The front of my house faces the side of their house, so I look at their backyard. The side of their house is where the shooting took place. Talked to the cops, gave my report 6 million times, checked my car for bullet holes. That was that. They were both released the next morning. The kid's family moved out less than a month later. Can still see the bullet holes in the siding. The neighbor's friend's car was riddled with bullets. Was picked up the next morning. Next story. I was at home eating ramen, minding my own business, when I heard a loud voice say, "This is the police. Come out of apartment 12 with your hands up." Luckily, I was not in 12. When I looked out the window, a dude in full riot SWAT gear with a giant gun was standing right there. I noped back to bed. Same apartment complex. 2 native lesbians live next door, and one of them you did not want to mess with. Some clueless dude smarted off to her, and I stepped outside when I heard them fighting. The one you don't mess with said she was going to call her brothers. Dude who smarted off went home. I stood there bullshitting with her for a while, and suddenly this pickup truck hauling ass pulled up. 3 guys in the cab and 4 guys in the back leaped out of the truck, with kerchiefs on their faces, and a combination of shotguns, knives, and baseball bats. I noped back inside, cause I don't want to see anyone get killed. But I peeked out my blinds anyway, and saw the brothers break down that dumbass's door and pour inside. And then the dude who had smarted off and his roommate broke their front window with a chair and jumped out and ran like hell. Next story. Road rage incident. I was a car behind Dude 1's car when he gets out of his car and walks up to Dude 2's car and slaps Dude 2 right when he got out of his car.
Dude 1 turns around and is getting back into car, and has his head hanging out talking crap still to Dude 2. Dude 2 runs and kick slams Dude 1's car door while his head was still out, and well, yeah. Then Dude 2 starts running around screaming, "He made me do it, you saw him," pounding on people's windows. We were on PCH, and this happened at first light. We all kinda stuck around when light turned, and car next to me didn't move to let me over, so I was stuck right behind when it happened. I didn't want to go to the trial, so I had to write my testimony. But turns out, guy that was killed had just had a baby, like only a few days old. Next story. Hurricane Wilma. At 9 years old. I didn't know WTF was happening, and no one in my family properly explained it. Then later in that storm, an electric pole broke and almost crashed into the house. The only thing that kept from breaking into our laundry room were the wires. Next story. A whole bunch of first responders went by and pulled into another apartment complex. The story I got was that they were responding to a woman being murdered by her boyfriend. Next story. Saw a guy walking on the sidewalk just pass out and fall over straight onto his face. I ran out to help. He was blackout drunk on what smelled like peppermint schnapps at like 10 a.m. and had busted his face up pretty good. He was fairly out of it, so I called 911 and waited with him until they showed up. Next story. My nice older neighbor walking her elderly border collie down the road like she always did. A rental home's wind/storm door being smashed open by the renter's pit bull, who then shot across the street like a missile to disembowel said elderly border collie while his owner screamed for help. Next story. Next door neighbor in my apartment building was coming home one night from his bartending job after last call and got confronted by his newly ex-girlfriend and her huge brother, who were both threatening to him. The day before, the girlfriend found out he was paying child support to another woman. Lucky for him, all the yelling at him woke up all his neighbors, and we called 911, who came to his rescue. If we hadn't, we were pretty sure he would have been on our front wall. Next story. A bright flickering star in the sky falling closer and closer to the Earth, leaving a trail behind it. The thought crossed my mind that this was the asteroid that would destroy Earth. I swallowed the thought and continued with my day. Next story. A guy ended his life because he didn't want to go to jail. The cops were chasing him, and the chase stopped right in front of our kitchen window. A standoff went on for like 2 hours, and the cops eventually busted out the guy's windows, and the suspect was dead. They dragged his body out and put it in the grass. That was the first dead body I ever seen. The second would be when my neighbors, who were gang members, almost got killed when the rival gang pulled up, and they started fighting. The rival gangs pulled out a steel pipe from their car and started beating my neighbor in the head with it. Their own people had to pull the guy off of my neighbor in order to stop him from killing my neighbor. The gangbangers fled in their car, and my neighbor was taken to the hospital by his family, and he survived it. Ended up seeing him around the complex a few weeks later. Next story. Watched a man in our complex parking lot walk between two neighbors' cars, drop his pants, and crap hot liquid lava out his ass onto the white stucco wall in front of the cars. It looked like a chocolate fountain tipped over onto the wall. He proceeded to remove one sock, give his ass a quick wipe, and drop the sock on the ground between the cars, before walking away like nothing happened. The remains of the ass-plosion on the wall baked in the sun, and stayed there for a few months, before nature took its course and it degraded. Next story. My neighbor, about 10 feet away, and his life. And they used my driveway to take his body out. Very upsetting and heartbreaking. Didn't know him well, but think about him often. Next story. A plane flying into the World Trade Center. I worked a few blocks away, and honestly didn't even hear the first one. The first plane hit the North Tower very high up, and many who weren't actually in the building even heard anything. I first noticed all the paper flying down all around my building. Also, my office faced east, so I was way on the opposite side of the building with the full view. I obviously found out right quick what the hell was happening, and ran to the west side of our building, which has floor-to-ceiling glass panels, and watched the rest of the horror unfold. Next story. I was an 80s latchkey kid, home alone. It was dark, and I saw flickering lights and heard screaming from down the street. A neighbor's house was fully engulfed in flames. The owner was outside, shrieking and wailing at the top of her lungs. Her baby was still in the house. Men from the neighborhood, one of them was my buddy's dad, attempted to rescue the child 2 separate times, but only lasted seconds inside the house due to the blinding smoke and heat. After what seemed like an eternity, the fire department arrived and got the fire under control quickly. A fireman emerged from the house, carrying what looked like a bundle of blackened, sooty blankets, and ran to a waiting ambulance, which did not move for a long time. Eventually, word came that the child did not survive. The screams of the mother and the looks of anguish on the sooty, singed faces of the neighborhood men who failed to rescue her baby have stayed with me for a lifetime. Next story. Many years ago, I lived on the second floor of an apartment building and looked out the window late at night to see a dude crouched in the parking lot. Pleasure like it owed him money. Next story. Heavily armed police in jungle green tactical uniforms looking under the hedge in my front lawn. There had been 2 people murdered in our townhouse complex. Adult son had gone to attack his dad. The mother tried to stop him. Both were fatally hit. Next story. It was out of a school bus window. I used to go to day camp at the YMCA. I was on my way home and traffic was backed up a bit and moving slow. I was really close to home and I saw what was slowing traffic. My neighborhood friend had been hit by a car and was lying in the street flat on his back. That was about 44 years ago, and I can still see that image in my head. He lived a few days, but was deemed brain dead and died. Worst thing I've seen out of a window. Next story. I live across from a small group home whose residents have some psych issues. One time late at night, one of them was walking around with a sledgehammer and smashing up the tiles along the house's front wall. And another time, this woman had a meltdown on the sidewalk so bad they had to inject her with meds and take her away in an ambulance. We were never informed that the house had become that group home, by the way, so it was extra alarming. A heads up would have been nice. Next story. Man from house across the way end his life. I just stood looking until my dad came, who did the same thing. Shock. Before coming to his senses and ushering me away from the window. Next story. I was standing by the window, rocking my newborn back to sleep at around midnight, when a car was heading full speed towards us. Thankfully, the car hit the corner of our fence that was reinforced concrete, so the car flipped over instead of heading straight to the window where I was standing with my baby. The female driver was ejected from her windscreen with blood everywhere.
Apparently, someone hit her first, and she lost control of the vehicle. From what I can tell, she made it out alive somehow. Well, neither baby nor I got any sleep that night with all the sirens and the shock. Next story. A man with a dark stare walking towards a big circle of friends. None seemed to notice him since he was able to point a gun at another man and shoot him in the face. Took off running, and all the guy's friends chased after him. Turns out, his ex-girlfriend was seeing the guy that got shot. It was a .22, so he is able to cough the bullet up and live. Next story. I saw a woman get shot through the back door of her car. The ambulance come and take her out of the car and dress the gunshot wound and then take her to the hospital. Not sure if she made it. This was peak COVID riot insanity with the George Floyd protests and people just doing crazy stuff because they were trapped inside too long. Next story. Smash and grab robbery right outside my truck window. I was in a Walmart parking lot and some dudes pulled up to the empty car parked next to me, smashed the passenger window, and raided the glove box in like 10 seconds. It took me 20 seconds to realize what I had just seen. They were very professional.
Next story. This was many years ago. I was in my late teens. Saw a guy climbing up the front wall of the house in front. Lived in a bad neighborhood. Most of my neighbors were dealers. The biggest dealer's house was behind this one, and he had paid a guy to hide around $30,000 cash inside the wall of one of the rooms. Later that night, while the family was out, he climbed up the house in front, got in through the upstairs terrace door, and stole it all. The dealer wanted to take the guy who was supposed to be standing guard out for a little drive to a field, but got talked out of it by my father. Next story. When I was a freshman in high school, a kid I knew was hit by a train while playing chicken right outside my house. I heard the group he was in talking outside before it happened and considered joining them. I knew when I saw the police lights and the people searching for his body outside my window that I'd made the right choice by staying inside. Next story. Out of my bedroom window, I saw a guy stagger around the middle of the road wailing, "My son!" and beating on the pavement. Some ladies came outside and led him away. It was awful. Next story. The coroner removing the body of our neighbor who hadn't been heard from in months. It was Father's Day and his daughter was dropping off a card. She found him at the bottom of the stairs. They think he died in March. He was in his 70s and kept to himself. We noticed the grass was getting long, then it would be cut. Turns out another neighbor would cut it sometimes. The smell lasted weeks. Next story. Thanksgiving. Over a decade ago, I lived with my family in a nice quiet neighborhood out in a rural-ish area. It was nice enough weather that we had windows open. Everyone's chatting, eating, and laughing. My family is loud. When we heard gunshots. Living in a rural area, that's not uncommon, but it irritated me because it was Thanksgiving.
Can the rednecks hold off on target practice for one day? So I yelled out the window, "Stop shooting for once!" I swore I heard a scream after that. I told everyone to be quiet and listen, because my family was loud and laughing and telling me to shut up. But I was insistent and said, "Shut up and listen." Everyone got quiet, and then they all heard the screaming too. We look out the windows to our front yard and see a woman screaming for help and running toward our house with a gun in her hand. My dad told my brother to go get his gun,
and I immediately called 911. It was terrifying because we had no idea what was going on. Was this woman crazy and about to shoot at us or what? The lady is frantic and yelling, "He's trying to kill me!" My dad had his gun by that point and made her drop her gun because she was waving it around, and it turned out it was still loaded and cocked with the safety off. We got her inside and took care of her while she told us what happened. Apparently, her ex-boyfriend showed up at her house and broke in and was trying to kill her, so she grabbed her gun and ran out of the house up the driveway while he chased her. While being chased, she said she turned around and shot at him, and then he went running up the street and disappeared. She came to our house because, funnily enough, she heard me yell out the window after the gunshots and realized we might be her best chance at help. The cops came not long after and set up a canine search for the guy. It was scary while waiting for the cops because we had no idea where this man went, so we were all looking out the different windows into the backyard and stuff, just in case he was nearby and planning to try to break in. They found the man like a week later, hiding out in someone's house a couple towns over, with a gunshot wound to his leg, and he was charged and put in jail. Next story? I don't think it was horrifying, but I'll add it because it was hilarious.
It was raining very hard, so much so that water was flowing in the streets, and I see my rolling trash bin rolling right down the street, away from me. Next story. The building next door caught fire. No one was hurt, and the businesses on the ground floor were okay. 4-story building. But it was a really big fire. Next story. Grew up on the farm in the middle of nowhere. When I was a kid, no older than 7 or 8, there was a local man, one of our neighbor's sons I think, who started using substances. He started camping out on the woods on our property, which we didn't know until I looked out my bedroom window, saw a man, and screamed. It turned out fine, but considering this farm was in Appalachia, and I grew up with rules. One of them was, of course, it doesn't matter if you're on the 2nd floor. Close the blinds so nothing peeps in. So I was convinced he was a monster. Next story. I have 3 instances that were all horrifying in their own way, so you be the judge. There's been videos floating around of it happening again recently, but when I was 19, I woke up and looked outside at the apocalypse. Bright orange as far as you could see, which wasn't far because the dust cloud was so thick. Australia, if it wasn't obvious, lol. I can't remember how long ago, but it was New Year's Eve, and I woke up to the most gut-wrenching wailing I've ever heard. Look out from my top-story window, and there's a woman collapsed on her driveway in absolute hysterics. I gathered from the screaming when her adult daughter arrived that she'd woken up next to her now-deceased husband, who had passed in his sleep. Tragic at the best of times, but it being New Year's Eve made it all the more heartbreaking. She couldn't bring herself to go back inside until the ambulance had taken his body. On a lighter note, my boyfriend was in a Zoom call working from home during COVID on his laptop, which is situated directly under a 2nd-story window with full view of the neighbor's yard. Fella in that yard just waltzing around the fence line absolutely cranking his hog. Next story. If office window counts, then at least 1 death, probably more, from the one office window in the few years I was there. One was a death from a neighboring high-rise. Didn't see him fall, but was standing right near the window when it happened, and make the mistake of looking down to see what people were yelling about. He climbed over from a balcony at the same level as our floor, and one guy in our office actually quit work because he had seen it happen and couldn't stand to be in the building anymore. It was very sad because the time of year made it obvious it was an overseas student stressed out from exam week pressures at university, and he landed in a ground floor apartment courtyard that was full of children's toys. For weeks after, we could still see the chair he used to climb over the balcony rail. It was a relief when they finally put it away. That same office window also looked over a black spot intersection, and I must have seen the aftermath of at least 8 or 9 pedestrians who had stepped out in front of traffic because the bad intersection design meant traffic moved against the direction it normally would, so pedestrians unfamiliar with the area would just step right out in front of cars. It was a dark thing to notice, but it was weird how they always landed in the same place, in the middle of the intersection. I hope they all recovered, but it's possible they were killed or had life-changing injuries. It certainly never looked very good, but we were relieved when they were actually moving after. They tried all sorts of signs and flashing lights, etc., to stop people stepping in front of cars, but in the end, rebuilt the entire intersection and nearby roads to remove that weird pedestrian crossing entirely. On the other side of the building was a river and large bridge, so yeah, there were all sorts of grim things going on out that side too. One very dark-humored paralegal had a pair of binoculars so she could get a better view of the drama, when for the umpteenth time someone climbed up the bridge and threatened to jump off.
which is not as awful when you know that nobody ever actually jumped that we saw. They came down eventually. But it was blackly funny to see the teams of police marching up and down the bridge all day. Up and down, while the traffic backed up below. One lady in the office said that when people really wanted to jump, they just jumped straight away, and usually at night so nobody would see, which I later found out she would know, as her own brother had jumped off that same bridge and died. Next story. Massive explosion and lorry fire that made us think a bomb had gone off. It was further away than it looks, so we were safe, but the village was lit up with the flames. Next story. We were moving out of our first apartment, which was a ground floor unit. Some people took a paddle boat out on the smallish lake behind it. It was cold, so they had coats on, and they didn't bring life preservers. The paddle boat sank. Only one of the two people made it to shore. I actually opened our door wall so the sheriff's deputies and dive team could warm up in our apartment while doing their official stuff. I couldn't leave as I was blocked in by all the rescue vehicles anyway. Next story. This might be paranormal. Our neighbors across the street had a lot of kids, all different ages. The oldest daughter, high school, was being stalked. A guy peeking through her bedroom window, footprints circling the house in the snow, knocking/tapping on the door, and random windows when she was home alone. And even a man waiting at the side of her house when she got off the school bus. But no one else ever seen the stalker. Only her. One night, her dad came over to my parents' house in a huff and borrowed a gun from my dad. The stalker was supposedly back and had run into the woods beside their house. They lived down a gravel driveway surrounded by woods. My whole family and the youngest kids from their family all crowded around the living room bay window to watch. The dad had a flashlight and my dad's handgun. He walked down the gravel road, turned, and went into the woods. Almost immediately after the dad and his light disappeared into the woods, the man in white walked out of those same woods, same side of the road. He walked onto the gravel driveway and then turned towards our house and froze, starting straight ahead towards our house. He was wearing a white sweatsuit, white hoodie with the hood pulled up, white shoes. We could all see him plain as day, and he just stood there, staring at us, looking at him through the window from across the street. It felt like he stood there for minutes. The party were all screaming, "We see him! We see him! He's right there!" Then everyone fell silent as it became creepy. He then slowly turned back towards the woods and casually walked off of the gravel driveway, back into the woods, the same side he appeared from, vanished. As soon as he left, their dad with the gun and flashlight walked out of the woods from the same side. They had to have almost passed each other. The dad didn't see or hear anything. Both of our parents began searching the woods around both houses, and they discovered small footpaths literally circling the neighbor's house and leading deep into the surrounding forest. My dad said they were just deer paths, but it was still creepy. I have no clue how their dad didn't hear his footsteps, the leaves crunching, twigs snapping. They had to have basically passed each other in the woods when exiting the gravel road. The man in white just kind of disappeared after that. I think there were a few more incidents, prank calls, etc. The oldest daughter graduated and moved out, and we never learned who, what, why, nothing. The oldest daughter was recently murdered this year. R.I.P. I'm sure it is completely unrelated, being 30 years later, but it's still unsettling. The most unsettling factor is the lack of resolution. Was it just a creepy guy? Jilted lover? Ghost haunting the grounds? All I know is, the woods of Appalachia are freaking strange. Next story. Sitting on my bed next to the window, and my mom comes into my room to talk to me about something. After a beat, she tells me to come with her, and we walk out of my bedroom. There was a man standing right outside my window watching me. She told my dad, who then grabbed an ornamental sword from above the mantelpiece and chased the man off our property. Next story. When I was 27, I lived in a ground floor apartment in Minneapolis with my small dog. One hot summer night, she jumped up and started barking at the open window. I instantly went into some kind of denial and started yelling at my dog, worried she would wake up neighbors, and turning on all my lights and stubbornly not looking out the window. After finding lights to turn on and giving the shock a few minutes to abate, I finally look out the window to see the screen all turned up and a crowbar laying on the strip of lawn beneath my window. I closed the window and locked it and sat and waited until the sun came up. I waited until 9 a.m. and called my landlord to report a broken screen. Human denial can be a funny thing. Next story.
I was just chilling at home, gaming. Suddenly, I heard a woman scream outside. I thought somebody was just playing or something. Then she screamed for help. Her ex/current boyfriend just packed her, threw her in his car, locked the doors, and drove away. Everybody was watching while this happened, and I had the cops on the phone telling me, well, there's nothing we can do about that. What? Next story. A police car chased down a car and stopped it. The guy got out of the car and charged the policeman with a knife and got shot.
He probably didn't die as he shot him in the leg, I think. I was awake at night to listen to my favorite podcast on radio.
Next story. I opened my door and there was a SWAT team taking position on the stairwell in the apartment complex behind my place. I was in my 20s. It barely fazed me. But today, that would ruin my week. Next story. Middle of the night, a naked crazy man was standing in the street, blocking a city bus, screaming, "La Luna!" over and over. It was a cute bungalow in downtown Atlanta. Just had our first baby. Moved to Alpharetta shortly after. Next story. Heard a girl get shot in the apartment across the courtyard from us. Watched someone run from the area and saw as the ambulance pulled up and her mom was screaming for help. It was really harrowing and awful. Next story. Don't know if this counts, but it was out of my cousin's window, so let me explain. We were at a birthday party in their neighborhood, and there was a car that was sitting there, and police were right next to it. Then they opened the door. One of them looks like they covered their nose, turned around, and did that thing where people nearly throw up, and I was like, oh, what's in there? I pointed out to the parents, and they all started talking about it, and then I saw them carrying oddly human-sized bag out of the car. Next story. My friend/neighbor was over at my house. We were in my bedroom when we started hearing a commotion coming from behind the apartment complex we were in. It ended up being my friend's dad screaming out the window from next door at two guys breaking into his car in broad daylight. We ended up looking out through my bedroom window and caught the end of the burglary. And I swear the dude doing the breaking in and the getaway driver looked like literal skeletons and their hair was just fire.
Going over the story over the years with my family who also saw the perps, it was confirmed they did indeed look like skeletons, thought to be in part due to drug and alcohol use. But all I know is that crap was traumatizing for a 4-year-old. Also, my friend swears to me they stole his McDonald's kids meal toy to this day. So screw those guys even more. Breaking into a car to steal a kid's toy. Next story. Cops caught somebody right in front of my house. I don't know what the story was, and I never found out. We saw cops walking by the windows and around our cars, so we laid low and kept quiet, and started watching through the cams instead. The guy was running from them, so they tased him and handcuffed him. I live in a quiet suburb where nothing ever happens. People just go to work and come home. None of us even know each other. So seeing all that drama right in front of the house was super weird. And seeing that guy tased, that was freakish. Next story. I live in a pretty rural area with a 200-meter driveway. The coolest thing that I've seen would probably be an osprey holding a fish that landed on the nearest telephone pole to the house. It looked right at me, and it had a big fish in its talons. I was very sad that no one believed me or was interested, because I was alone when I saw it. My neighbor along the road ended up with a stripper on his doorstep on New Year's that ran from a dangerous situation in a nearby house. Apparently, the neighbor's girlfriend hired her as a gift and then got jealous, and someone beat her up, and the guy ended up in jail for it somehow. I think that they might do crack or something though, so I'm not exactly sure why the guy was in jail. My boyfriend also ended up falling asleep while he was home alone, and waking up with the house almost on fire, when an unattended fire that the neighbor stated along the property line got out of control.
It almost burnt down another house too.
Like it literally started melting the siding, and there's a lot of spacing between the houses because we live in a rural area. A fire truck happened to be driving by and stopped to put out the fire since we live close to the fire department. I'm not sure what would have happened otherwise, but living next to a fire department definitely saved us that day. The neighbor that started the fire ended up getting a huge fine because there was a burn ban on at the time. Next story. I saw an attempted murder about a decade ago. I went to the window in the middle of the night because I heard loud engine roaring and someone screaming. Quiet neighborhood, so it was pretty unusual. Directly in front of our house, I saw someone drive by on an ATV, and behind him, there was a black car with tinted windows, trying to run him off the road. The guy on the ATV kept screaming, "Leave me alone!" Eventually, he drove onto the front yard of the house across the road and fell over. 4 guys wearing black motorcycle helmets jumped out of the car. 2 of them had baseball bats. The ATV guy begged them to stop and said he'd pay them,
but they immediately started beating him with the baseball bats. After they were done, they calmly went back to their car and drove off. I didn't see it at the time, but it turned out that the two guys who didn't have baseball bats had knives. They hit him 15 times or so. Somehow he survived. According to the newspaper reports, this was mob-related. The guy owned some kind of bar and owed them money. Quite a shocking scene to behold, especially knowing that they wanted to hit him. Don't think they ever caught the people who did it. Next story. It was the window of a bus, but I was on a trip to Boston in the 5th grade, so 1989 or 90. The driver somehow went down the wrong road, and it was a dead end in a park late at night. I remember the teachers grouching that the bus driver was an idiot because they could see the hotel, so why couldn't he get there? While the driver tried to figure out his 17-point turn, some men appeared. It all happened fast, but from what I can put together, Guy A was kissing Guy B. C, D, and E took offense to this. B ran for his life, leaving A to get brutally beaten. By the time I reconciled the screams, Guy A was gushing blood enough that he was mostly red, pawing at the door to the bus, begging for his life. The driver refused to open it, which I understand from a liability, but not a humanity standpoint. So he was shouting through the door that this F-slur needed to leave. I understood that we either let Guy A onto the bus and go to the hospital, or there was a good chance his assailants would return and finish the job. We would not let him on the bus. The driver navigated the bus out of there, bloody handprints on the windows, and got us to the hotel in 2 minutes. Our teachers shoved us inside, trying to block our view of all the blood. I don't think anyone called the police, and it seemed mostly forgotten about in the morning. Next story. Drive-by shooting of a car parked on the street at the end of the block near my apartment. That car got lit up. I left that neighborhood within the next year. Next story. I heard yelling. Saw a car pull up next to a man on the sidewalk, then race off. The car came back and tried to hit the man on the sidewalk, then sped off. The man wasn't hurt, and he tried to chase the car after being nearly run over. Next story. Not sure if any of you are old enough to know what a LAN party is, but you basically stay up all night at a designated storefront that has a row of computers with 20+ games to play with friends. They lock us in, and we all jam away.
The night before the incident, my brother, his friend, and I were playing games at the LAN party, 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. Anyway, fast forward to the morning after. My brother and I and his friend, who lived next door, trekked on home. We, of course, were exhausted and wanted to shower, etc. My brother crashed, and I stayed up for a bit longer. I heard loud noises, almost like screeching, above my house, but I could also hear a propeller-like noise. Turns out, the engine was sputtering. Anyway, I looked out my window just in time to witness a plane dive right into the house. My brother's friend, who we were just with all night, lived. His parents were at work, and unfortunately, he died, as well as the pilot. It was insane and just surreal. Next story. Early 80s, and I get up to watch my Saturday morning cartoons, brush my teeth, got my bowl of cereal, and head to the living room to turn on the TV. I don't know why, because I never really did it before, but I put the bowl down, walked to the bay windows, and saw a man bleeding on our front steps. This is a small city in NE that was run by the Italian mafia, and right next to our house was the Union Hall. Found out he was killed in the hall. They drug him out and just left him there. Knew he was dead because he was pale, and I'd just seen the miniseries Salem's Lot, and he looked like them. The mob feared and faced zero consequences. From what I remember my mom recalling about it years later, we don't remember if anything happened to whoever killed him. Lost my voice, yelling at my parents to wake up and call the police. Next story. What happens outside my window isn't my concern. I have a gun and 3 big-ass guardian breed dogs who are extremely clingy with their 2 moms and lose their minds if a grasshopper farts outside. Cane Corso, Chow Chow, Belgian Malinois. I got all these because I saw a woman be taken into an unmarked car off the street in my old neighborhood, and they never found her. Still think about her. I was too much of a coward to go after her, and I don't think I would have made a difference anyways. Next story. A guy got shot about 50 feet from my front door. I didn't see it, just heard it. My roommate happened to be looking out the window and saw the muzzle flare in the dark. There was a blood stain on the sidewalk the next morning. Never learned any further details. Next story. Saw a truck get hit by a train from my bedroom window. I lived beside a railroad crossing for a while. One day, I heard the crossing alarm go off, and then seconds later, a loud bang. Looked out to see a truck wedged under the gate arm.
Driver tried driving through it and then reversing, but the truck was stuck partially on the tracks. The thing I see all the time in my head is the driver door opening and the man trying to jump out, but his seatbelt was still on. His legs were kicking and he was trying to reach back to unbuckle without turning around. Then the train, horn blaring, smashed into the truck. Guy slingshotted back inside the cab and pieces of his front end flew everywhere. I thought I'd just watched a man die, but dude was super lucky. The train pushed his truck back and to the side. The door opened seconds later and he fell out, and some neighbors outside were able to help him stand and walk to the sidewalk. He only had a cut on his forehead and a sore shoulder. Don't ever try to run through a crossing gate because you're running late and think you can beat it. You won't. It's not worth it. Next story. I was in a taxi going from a hotel on the outskirts of NYC into the city. I was looking out the window and saw a dead body hanging from one of the overpasses. First responders were there trying to cover the body up.
Next story. Watched a woman around my age walking into traffic to try and take her own life. Initially thought she was drunk, but I had a gut feeling something was wrong and turned around. She was lying flat in the road. Stopped traffic. Managed to calm her down and get her to the curb. Got her to tell me where she lives. Asked her if she would be comfortable if I took her home to her family. I didn't want to call police in case they arrested her. But turns out she was not comfortable with that, and she tried to punch me in the face and jumped out of my car while it was moving. I had to chase her down the street and tackle her to stop her from jumping on the train tracks. People came and helped me and called emergency services, but I left before they arrived. I hope she got the help she needed. Next story. Looked out my office window as a car purposefully plowed into a protest. Thankfully, a building was blocking my view, but not what I heard. But seeing the reaction of the police and the remaining protesters threw me for a loop. Next story. Drug deal gone bad in the yard of the vacant house next door. I was doing some dishes looking out my kitchen window and noticed 3 guys in the yard. Next thing I know, 2 of them are beating the hell out of the third, and he's yelling and screaming. Both bad, or badder, guys took off through the neighborhood yards, hopping fences to the woods. The guy who got his ass kicked said they stole his cell phone cord, then jumped in his ratty-ass Ford pickup and took off down the street. I did call the cops, but the tag on the truck was registered to a compact car. No victim, no crime. I'll remember them other guys, though. Next story. My ex-girlfriend hiding in my backyard playset, watching me through my bedroom window with binoculars. I didn't let her know I saw her until she hit me up a few months later. Played it super casual until I dropped the bomb. Next story. When I lived in a students-only flat, my upstairs neighbor took some substances and had a bad trip and jumped through his window, shattering the glass, to his death. I heard the sound of something heavy hitting the pavement below and looked out of my window because I thought some assholes were throwing furniture from up high again. Student accommodation and all that. And instead, I saw him. He lived on the 13th floor and was already dead, but I will never forget the sound of his housemates screaming his name. I lived quite far up, 10th, so I was mostly able to avoid seeing stuff beyond my first look. And I wouldn't have looked if I'd known what had happened. But those screams? A year later, we had a double murder a few apartments down from us, though luckily I wasn't home that time, so I avoided really noticing that beyond all the emergency services. Good times. Next story. 3 apartments that I had. I lived in an apartment where stuff went on in front of my windows, but I completely blocked out the view most of the time, so that these fools couldn't look inside. Things I saw when I did look out? Only the crime scene and didn't see the action. I think the craziest I've seen was the guy from the other side of his street locked his girlfriend on the balcony during a fight and just left. She was there for 5 to 6 hours and pissed on the balcony. The piss left a wet mark along the building from the balcony to the pavement. Next story. A man laid out dead in the front yard next door. He'd been running from the cops and bailed just as his truck hit the corner of my neighbor's house. He lay there for hours while they investigated. Next story. Lived in Austin for a while, and one day I was home cleaning the apartment and suddenly heard loud banging and screaming. Ignored it for a few minutes, and then the screaming turned into cries for help, and he's going to kill me. I called 911 and explained what I heard. The cops came and broke their door down. I watched out my window as they took the man out in handcuffs. He was kicking and screaming. As they were taking him to the car, neighbors were yelling at him not to talk and that the cops were just out to get him, hopefully not knowing why he was getting arrested. But it was a crap hole complex, so maybe not. A day or 2 later, I went to walk my dog, turned a corner, and he was back. I think about that woman a lot and hope she ended up okay. Next story. It has to be either the time I saw my neighbors brawling,
during which one punched the other after they threw a very large item from the garden at them, or seeing a deranged family member try to break into our house after screaming death threats, which led to barricading ourselves into a bedroom until the police arrived. Next story. My mom and I were taking a nap one evening, and I smelled something burning. I tried to tell my mom, but she thought I was just making an excuse to not fall asleep. The smell got stronger, so I looked out the bedroom window which faced the intersection in front of our house. There was a car at the stop sign right in front of our house, completely engulfed in flames. From what I remember, no one was in the car, and no one was injured. I remember seeing the crowd of neighbors standing around the intersection, and there were burn marks on the ground for years after. On 2 other separate occasions, I was driving home and saw the whole 911 squad at a house in my neighborhood. Next story. My neighbor hit the deck, get worked on by paramedics for about an hour, pass, and lay on the pavement under a sheet for several hours until the coroner came to fetch him. Next story. Was watching a Michael Myers film with a friend, and someone stood underneath a streetlight across from the house for a good while, just staring towards the house. Nothing came off it, but it was weird. Next story. Last summer, I was working as a camp counselor. We were evacuated to the highest point of camp early in the morning due to flooding. The river was still in view from the windows of that building, so watching it continue to rise after our CEO, who was safe in another city, said we would not be evacuated from the camp entirely was horrifying. All the people who died in the flooding minutes away several days prior were at the forefront of everyone's minds. I know the thought, "I might die here," crossed all of our minds that morning. Luckily, the river didn't quite reach the citywide evacuation level before going back down. On a lighter note, I nearly jumped out of my skin one evening because I let my dogs out and forgot to turn on the light. I looked out the window and saw a white figure with black eyes staring right back at me in the dark. It was just my dog sitting on a table that brought her up to the height of the window. She's got that sighthound stare. Next story. We used to live in a busy city. The amount of people outside drunk or on drugs at 2 a.m. is crazy. We actually paid to get out of our lease and only lasted 5 months.